again, the theme here from me this evening, the news and what we can do about it. John Soltz, I'll cut straight to it here, a man who is all too familiar with the news, a veteran in this country, a man who still serves in the reserves, and a man who is on a crusade, a campaign to educate the American people not only about the news, if you will, from the Middle East and our soldiers and this war, but perhaps to offer them a broader and more complete context about these wars and a path towards solution so that we can end them and at least be honest about why it is that we fight them. John and his organization is Vote Vets, and it is an absolute delight to have you here, John, and of course somebody who I admire and consider a friend. So before we get into the conversation of the day, if you will, John, tell us, what is Vote Vets? What are you guys doing?
Well, we do a lot of stuff, but we call ourselves the voice of today's veterans. So we like to bring to life real veteran stories and real veterans issues to highlight basically what's going on in the wars or how policy affects our troops today. So we've been talking a lot about energy because not only does energy security affect how many times our troops go to Iraq, but last month it affects our National Guard troops down in Louisiana because they end up cleaning up for, messes that big oil with trillions of dollars of profit make.
At the end of the day, is it too simple to say that your point is that that our best and brightest, our youngest and bravest, however you want to characterize the American Army, but no one looks at it with anything other than great admiration and its obvious capabilities, but that those capabilities are being abused by our government to serve energy interests? Is that too simple on my part?
It's pretty close. I mean, the bottom line is that our troops are beholden to a poor energy policy, which, ensures that they're going to go to the Middle East over and over and over again. And certainly I think when you talk about energy security and you talk about our dependence on foreign oil, it's certainly a national security issue first, more than anything, because our entire military is focused on our energy resources. But today, we put another $1.5 million on the air, which makes, obviously another argument for the energy climate bill legislation, but basically saying, look, when you've got all this greatest natural disaster ever in the Gulf, and I know I was on your MSNBC show talking about this after the president's speech, but offshore drilling was never the answer, and you can see not only is it not the answer, but the disaster it's caused has now even affected the fact that our National Guard has to go clean up the mess. So that's really what we're talking about today, and if now isn't the time to pass the energy climate legislation, I'm not sure when it is, because this is a story that's been dominating the news for the last month, and it's really a time where Congress and the President need to act to find some long-term solutions, not just for energy security, but on the climate side, because they're both interconnected. You mentioned that the new ad today, the $1.5 million spend at places like MSNBC. Thank you. I know that you help actually to sponsor my own program, and I appreciate your support of our message. As you know, it's very much in alignment with your own message. If you were to look, though, at what anybody could do, if I went to votevets.org, what is it that my mother can do, that Jody Evans over at Code Pink can do? JR wants to help. What can he do? Go to votevets.org, and when you go to votevets.org and you sign up, every couple times a week you're probably going to get an email. It might be under my name or one of our other veterans, and going to tell you what you have to do every day to help veterans. So today we launched the $1.5 million ad. I'm hoping here in about 10 minutes the House is going to pass Patrick Murphy's resolution to repeal the Don't Ask, Don't Tell ban. Now, Patrick Murphy is a second-term congressman from near Philadelphia in Pennsylvania who was the first Iraq war veteran elected to Congress. And we think, and he's someone who we helped get elected through our political action committee. We've given him money. We've raised him money. But we hope this bill is going to pass here, the House, and then we're going to have a bigger fight in the Senate. It got out of the Senate Armed Services Committee today. So we're going to have a big vote on that. So Vote Vets is where you can sign up, and you can always find out what's affecting the community. So today we're talking about energy independence. Tomorrow, most likely, we'll be talking about Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Next week, we'll probably be talking about Joe Sestak and his big win over our inspector and how we can support him going forward against Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania, since he's the first Afghanistan war veteran elected to Congress. So if you want to find out what's going on in the veterans community every day on Capitol Hill, and you want to figure out how you can make a difference, all you got to do is go to Vote Vets and sign up. We've got 100,000 people signed up over there. Over 50,000 of them are military families or veterans. But if you're not a veteran, you should still sign up, because in the future of our country, the most important supporters for veterans actually are non-veterans, because only 1/3 of 1% of the population is serving in this conflict. It's the only time we fought a protracted war with no end state. And we are dependent upon, and young veterans are going to be dependent upon, a lot of non-veterans to support our issues. So everyone's welcome to sign up and learn how they can make a difference every day, who to call, who to donate to make a difference on our issues.
And you know you have my support every step of the way, John. Do you think people understand that we have had an army, an actively engaged combat military in the Middle East for a decade now that has been largely the same individuals, the same men, the same women being sent over and over and over again into what can only be characterized as the closest thing at its worst to hell on earth, as a way effectively to protect the balance of the population from really being exposed to what's going on? Do you think people know that?
This is the issue that hurts me the most, because no, I don't think America really understands that. And I'll tell you why. The first reason they don't understand it is because they don't feel threatened every day. Okay, so it's not like, we invaded Iraq as if it was actually justified and there was going to be, an attack on the United States. So I don't think they feel that threat. But this weekend is going to be Memorial Day weekend. And for people in the military, it's not a day to protest any war. It's not a day to say you support any war. It's just a day that you remember those who died in war. And most Americans this weekend, when we talk about going to the beach, they're going to go to Vegas, they're going to do their thing, they're going to party it up. But Memorial Day in this country is a 3-day weekend, and all everyone knows is they have Monday off. You have a cultural shift in this country that's gotten away from honoring those who fought and died. And I think what's most important for veterans and veterans that are listening is veterans have to lead in those ceremonies. Veterans have to go, and they have to do on Memorial Day what they should do, which is remember their friends who died in wars and family members of those who have died in wars. Because if we don't remember first, then the rest of society won't care. So I think, no, not only do they not know we got guys overseas all the time because they don't feel it, but I think we've gotten away from service in this country, and we have so few people serving that it's a real big problem.
How much is the media responsible for that by virtue of the nature of its coverage of these wars?
Well, that depends on the network that you're talking about, Dylan. I happen to think MSNBC does a rather good job of talking about the war in itself, and I actually think some of your competitor networks do also. But when you start looking at what we're promoting in regards to, the other TV stations that people watch and those types of things, I think when you want to sell and you want ratings, well, it's very hard for people to always turn on the news every day and watch war. And I think after a while, the casualty rates and the death count, it becomes more like the weather report. So if people want to watch news stations and they want to start watching, even stations like Al Jazeera, how the press and the war is covered in the international market is different from ours. And although our cable news channels, for the most part, like to cover the war, really mainstream, the mainstream media doesn't do the due diligence that the American or the international press or some of our cable networks try to do. And most people choose not to watch cable news, and that's unfortunate.
Can I ask you a question about Afghanistan, John?
Let's talk.
When I talk to, and this is only anecdotal, I don't claim this as any grand analysis, but when I have the opportunity to speak to either soldiers who are currently serving in Afghanistan or have recently returned from Afghanistan, and I say this on the show, and I ask them, I say, why is it when you come under assault, when you are under violent assault with direct threat to your life and to the life of those you are working with, and I say, why are you under that assault? What is it that is provoking that assault? Too often the answer that I get is we're trying to protect ourselves from losing our lives because we're there. That being there is the risk. Is that the case? And what is the sense day to day, forget the grand policy, the State Department, day to day, you wake up, you have coffee, you put on your pants, and you go to work, and you're an American soldier in Afghanistan. What is the definition of the mission for those who are there? Not in the grand presidential sense, but in the day-to-day sense. I wake up, I've had a cup of coffee, and and the sun is rising. Why am I there?
Well, I think in both the wars, you ask a fundamental, real question, and I think there's a lot of people that are going to feel differently as to why we got involved in Afghanistan versus Iraq. But one of the major sort of things I certainly talked about the night the president spoke at West Point on some of the cable networks, they had some really fancy answers about why we're in Afghanistan. And if I was to go and ask soldiers who are in the field today, I don't think anybody can give you a real good answer as to what that mission is. And that's a huge red flag. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't a military mission in Afghanistan, but the complexity of what this administration's chosen to try to do, I think, is something up for debate. And so, unfortunately, where it puts our troops now is in a posture of, today, when I wake up, I'm going to not die. And that is sort of where both wars have reverberated back to, where your troops are on the ground saying, okay, my role in a convoy attack is going to be, I'm going to drive through a kill zone, or I'm the aid and litter team, and I'm going to provide medical support for the person who's wounded. And most of the time what our soldiers are going through every day in both of these conflicts is very tactical sort of analysis on what their job is, because there's very sort of a big failure on what the strategic side is. Now, the larger question you're talking about, what people getting shot at and how they respond in the COIN strategy, is the president's brought into this COIN strategy, we call it, which is counterinsurgency operations. And some of the General Petraeus guys, they're actually on both sides of the fence. Some of the thinkers are Democrats, some are Republicans. They've really sold the president on what counterinsurgency strategy is. And I was both that did not endorse what he wanted to do in Afghanistan, but mostly because we oppose COIN as a viable strategy for our country. What it would cost us economically to do it, that it would require President Karzai to be a legitimate partner in peace, that it would require the Pakistanis to want to play. So essentially, I'm 100% confident that if you put more troops in Afghanistan, you can provide security, which is what McChrystal's trying to sell. General McChrystal's trying to say, we're going to provide security. Okay, so that's great, but we don't really have an interagency process in our government to go in and give the help. We've got problems with the posture and Hamid Karzai and whether or not, they feel that he's legitimate or if he's a heroin drug runner. And you certainly have issues on where the Pakistanis are in this debate. So when you're only sure that you can be 100% confident that you are successful at 25% of the equation, do you want to, again, get into a situation where you lead with the military and you put them into these situations on the ground that are so complex? And so I certainly would have rather for the president to have not put a timeline on Afghanistan, because I do feel if bin Laden's there, we have a right to get him any place, anywhere, anytime. But I think his scope and his mission focus should be completely probably taken away from the COIN strategy and completely focused on al-Qaeda terror elements that operate or train in that country. Because no matter how much troops we put in any country all over this world, al-Qaeda can bend, move, they can attack us cheap, and we could spend trillions of dollars chasing ghosts all over Afghanistan or other states in the Middle East and expose hundreds of thousands of troops to multiple deployments, the effect that's going to have on these veterans for a long time. It's a very high cost analysis, but most likely what you're going to get in counterterrorism operations.
Yeah, I agree with you, John, and I can't applaud loudly enough or aggressively enough your efforts every single day to deliver the news, so to speak, and more importantly, provide an avenue, a mechanism for people to feel empowered, to get educated, for those of us who are not veterans, but who are incredibly empathetic to what our veterans and our active service members are going through, so that we can help, so that we can apply the political pressure, so that we can apply the observation of the cost of this war, not just the grand ambitions of this war, but a real understanding of the cost of this war and the real leverage when it comes to things like energy. John, again, thank you so much for what you're doing. John Soltz, votevets.org. It's worth being a part of this community for the simple reason that it is the lives of our brothers and sisters who are out halfway around the world every day attempting to serve to the fullest of their ability their obligations to our military, which has been deployed on our behalf. and it is our obligation to look out for their best interests every single day and to hold our government to account to the extent to which it passes the buck and seeks effectively convenient political solutions that come at the expense of the American citizenry or our soldiers. VoteVets.org, if you're not already involved with it, it truly is one of the best places that I've seen in connecting the dots on this war, not just the grand policy, not just the security, not just the energy, not just the revolving door of soldiers, but the entire matrix, which is critical, obviously, if we're going to do anything about it. So again, thanks to John for giving us a slice of his afternoon